Okay, we'll go ahead and call the meeting to order for Monday, March 11th for the Parks and Recreation Advisory Commission. We'll start with roll call. Carrie Stuckey, that's me, I'm here. Shane?
Here.
Kate?
Here.
Eric?
Here.
And Tom? Okay. All right, next up, we've got the approval of the agenda. Can I get a motion for that?
I move that we approve the agenda as written.
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Next, we'll move on to the approval of the minutes for the special meeting of February 13th, 2024. Can I get a motion?
Yeah, I'll motion that
Okay.
we approve.
I'll second, yep.
Okay, all in favor?
All right.
Okay. All right, our next item is public comment. Did we have any public comments today? No? Okay. All right, no public comments, so we'll go ahead and move on to our discussion items. Item A, Recreation Coordinator Introduction.
Hi, good morning. So we have Craig Lamas Cole, who has his first day starting today. He's with HR today. He's our new recreation coordinator. He'll be working with Liz Lang. Over at the center is where his office will be housed. And Craig will help us with the development of all the new recreation programming. He'll be multifaceted to kind of begin with, doing both athletics, some fitness, arts programming, life enrichment, and helping with running the programs that we're doing over at the Interpretive Center as well as ones at the center. And then he'll also be working with the sports leagues on scheduling the athletic fields, and then we'll eventually be helping take over the special event permitting as well from McHale. So we've transitioned the kitchen and park reservations over to parks, and Brandon's mostly doing that now, and Craig on the recreation side will work with the athletic field scheduling. So I'm going to turn the mic over to him and let him just kind of introduce himself and tell you a little bit about him and his background and anything that you'd like to share about your vision with this very new endeavor into the recreation side for programming for the city.
Well, hello. Thank you for having me. I'm here. This is my second full week here in Oak Harbor, and I'm looking forward to getting really be hands-on with the community and building our recreation programs. I have a lot of experience in building programs, working with the City of Los Angeles. I have over 20 years of experience there, both full and part-time, in building recreation programs, and looking forward to bringing that experience here and like I said, getting hands-on and building what we can for the community.
Great, we're glad you're here, Craig. Thank you.
Welcome.
All right, so moving on to item B, McHale said we're going to table that until the next meeting, so we'll move on to item C, Hal Romali Park.
Okay, so we have a development proposal from Hilton Hotel, and they're working on a site plan. Let me jump on the meeting here, and I'll share my screen and show you. Hi, Kate. Sorry, I didn't even see that you were on.
Good morning.
Okay, now I gotta find which one it is here. Let's. we go. Okay, let's see if that pulls up where we can see. Yeah. Okay, there we go. Okay, so this is the site plan for the new hotel. It's located at the Hal Romali Park, as well as where Imagine Food Forest is. And if you see this line right here, if you can see my cursor, that is the border of the city's own parcels to the south of there. So this section here on the west is the Imagine Food Forest, and over here on the right is the Hal Romali Park. So the hotel footprint right now, right here, parking lot, and then they're working on what this configuration will look like as far as a land swap. They might do it a little differently with a in-kind value with maintenance or whatever. We've also looked at a couple of other options of perhaps selling over or turning over in some kind of an exchange, perhaps for another parcel that we can use for a new community garden, this whole plaza. Right now, Hal Romali has limited public value. It's heavily used sort of as a hangout for transients that come from the bus stop's right there. We were just about to engage in some conversations with Imagine Food Forest about renovating that space and making some improvements to the park. We don't have any problem with transients hanging out the park, but that seems to be all it's being used for right now. And we really would like to beautify it and provide a little better public value to it. So with this development site, the original proposal had about half of that food forest going away. They're looking at a configuration that would sort of keep a little bit of a community garden. We have some concerns with that just because it creates a little bit of a sight barrier from the road with the rest of the park. So we'd rather just relocate the community garden to a whole new parcel and just start over there. We'll have some discussions with Imagine about that, but we're still working on where those locations might be. Brandon's had a few ideas about that. As far as the plaza, we also talked about reconfiguring this a little more so it's a little more inviting for the public. One of the ideas we talked about was creating a food truck plaza that would have a pull-in for food trucks to park, and then have some kind of nice shaded seating here, sort of bistro style for people to come and grab some food from the park across the street and sit down and eat. One of the reasons we were looking at a transfer is also maintenance. We really wanted to make sure if this is going to be designed for public use, that it really is designed outward facing and inviting to the public rather than just being a beautified space for hotel guests. So we're working through a development agreement with Hilton on what the maintenance looks like. Do we have the facility, the hotel provide that maintenance, or is that maintenance going to come on parks? They have a little bit of a landscaping plan, and our arborist is going to go through and look at the tree selection there. With their design, they had sort of a hardscape plaza, some seating area. There was an idea for maybe a play feature of some kind. They give sort of an idea of what something like that might look like. So just kind of throwing out some different possible configurations. We'd love to get some of your feedback on it. When we met with Ray Lindenberg with Development Services, some of the notes from that meeting was we talked about issues in general for public spaces, talked a little bit about the transients and people's right to congregate. If it was private property, the owner could trespass people if we were having a problem with encampments or things like that. Talk about how will it be utilized, specific programming that we'd want to do there, for instance, like maybe Zumba in the park or ideas that Craig might have for activating the space. We had shown on the plans that there could be buskers there, do some, performances, maybe it might play a role during festivals for special events. It's right across the street from the park. But our questions were on maintenance, who would be responsible for that, a little bit about the concept of having the developer provide maintenance for maybe a 3-year period. That's typically would be the bond duration, and then maybe the option of having them continue the maintenance or place a sign stating such. We talked about simplifying the uses within the park, maybe not try and shove in a little bit of everything for everyone, but have it very specific for its use. It's a smaller space. It's a little bigger than what I would consider a pocket park. It's right across from one of our main parks. There is a lot of activity in the area, but not a lot that draws people across the street to the Hal O'Malley Park right now. So these ideas of having it as a space for a food truck area are pretty attractive, and that was one of the concepts that Ray really liked, was providing that specific drive aisle for a certain number of trucks. We need to talk about who would administer the permits or permissions for that, electrical boxes and different other needs. We'd want to be able to have the ability to power wash the area if we do make it a food centric place. And then we talked, like I mentioned, a little bit about a sell or a swap of the entire parcel to Hilton, where we would provide a new location for the food forest, value for value concept, and then just checking and making sure on processes, is it okay by state law, how we would do a land swap. But would love to just open it up for any comments from the commission as far as uses, ideas of what you'd like to see in a space like that, any concerns you have with the site plan. Like I said, they're still working on the landscaping and the configuration of the park, but the general footprint is probably what's going to end up being there in some form.
Is the garden club actively using, or have they been actively using the site?
Imagine is the organization that does most of the maintenance and uses the site. The garden club isn't really involved with the food forest there as much as I'm concerned or understand. But the garden club did speak with us that they are interested in creating a new community garden. This was right before we were about to schedule meetings with Imagine to talk about that and maybe renovating the site, and then we found out about this development, so we put that on hold. But they would definitely like to be involved if we create a new community garden space.
Where does the food forest sort of sit on the priority, I guess, for city council and stuff? Is that is it something that everybody's really passionate about, or is it just kind of a thing that exists and so we're looking to continue it on?
It's not listed as one of the council priorities, but a community garden has pretty high community value, both for programming, for senior services. I think there's a lot of interest in having a community garden as long as it's well managed.
Yeah, let me rephrase that. The community garden as it exists in its current iteration versus maybe an ideal state, because I think maybe those are two different things.
Yeah. So the current food forest, we don't do a lot with it. I think we've helped out a little bit with some of the maintenance as far as pruning. It's mostly managed by Imagine, but it regularly gets overgrown. We've had some issues with it. The city really hasn't been involved previously with it.
I think when I hear what I'm taking away from this, it seems like a land swap might be in the best interest. One, to procure some other place to do community gardens, since there seems to be interest. You just spoke to the value of it. There seems to be interest from multiple parties. I think Imagine would like to keep going. Also, we have the garden club potentially interested in it. It is a weird space. It's also a space that is really congested. We have such poor parking on that side of the park for our, sort of premier park in the city, and it's even worse when baseball's involved. And then we have issues with parking on private property with the investing in ourselves, that headache might be a really good idea by swapping out the non that off Friday and then figuring out what we can do going forward to solve the parking issue. Since I doubt the hotel will be really interested in sharing parking for city events. And then also the food truck idea, I think is very interesting. But we do have that piece of land on the end of Bay Shore that I thought maybe was into consideration for some of that stuff. Either was looking like it had been talked about as being the plaza. And I know that puts it a little bit further away from the park, but it also allows for space and revitalization of an unused area, frankly, an eyesore in a very premier location in the city. And I wonder if we think about this opportunity, and it's a really good opportunity to do something of that nature, but it also sort of shorts us for a better option later. And then knowing once we have something in place, being harder to then upgrade to a new site and do the same thing rather than, which would be a better use potentially of the space and maybe a better economic for the community. That would be some of my concerns. And I am very concerned about the traffic there because it is just a safety issue, and I don't know if there's any consideration to traffic and volume and how that's going to be handled. And I think it then again also just really puts the onus on us to do something to get those baseball fields moved as soon as possible, honestly. This is a really good development for downtown, I think. But those baseball fields are a problem, and the traffic's a problem, and the parking's a problem. There's really nothing that's not a problem when it comes to those baseball fields there. But this is a really good solution for that space. I like it. I think those are my comments there. I think we get a lot of wins out of this. Is what I think what I'm trying to say. But just make sure we keep a long-term focus and take advantage of short-term opportunities as well.
I really like the idea of, sorry, that was really loud. I really like the idea of the food trucks there because I do feel like it's kind of a reason to pull people from the park towards downtown. Because right now, the park, I feel like, is just far enough away from downtown that people don't really have a reason to go from the park to downtown shopping. I think that having food trucks right there might be a really interesting idea with picnic tables or whatever, as kind of a way to pull people towards, in that direction, towards the downtown. So I like that idea. I think so, right? Yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
You have to come to the microphone and say.
You all know who I am, Barbara Adams, council member. We have been talking about food trucks. We have somebody that's really interested in having it in the community for all the time. What we're having is the regulations. And it's like a 60-day thing, people are talking 90, people want to make it year-round. And so we have somebody that's interested in the community, and that person's spoken that there's other people. So it is something that we're trying to work on, and we've been working on it for months to provide another resource for income and for people to be integrated in what they want to do. So we are working on that issue. I'm working on that issue with Stephen Castle and people. So it's something that's there. It's not something we're trying to fix it right now. So that's what we're working on. So that would be great if we could do that because we don't have the restaurants. People don't have enough places to build. I mean, it's too expensive. And so a young person, they don't have to have all the help, and we could actually employ and make some revenue. So that's where that's at.
Was that the location you were looking at for food trucks, or did you not have one?
Nobody had given us anything specific
Okay.
because they had to find their spot. And it would be nice if we had a permanent spot that we could, it would be something innovative for the community. Something that people say, oh, did you know what has food trucks? There's people in other areas like that. They want a variety of things that they can do. So that's what we're working on. So hopefully we'll get through.
Okay,
Thanks.
thank you.
How many food trucks in that
How many would be available?
Well, let's just say this, how many food trucks could be put into that are looking for a pull-through at that current, Hal Ramley Park right now? If we put a drive-through there, how many, pull-through for food trucks, how many food trucks do you think could fit in there at one given time?
I don't know. We haven't looked at the footprint for it yet. It'd be a good handful at least. Yeah.
My initial thinking, and I know we're supposed to be protecting the interests of the city, but we might be doing that by allowing the hotel to build it out to their benefit. I think that would also, I agree with Eric, and, if we could start fresh somewhere else and build it to our requirements as opposed to trying to reinvent something in that space. And I wasn't clear what you were saying. Under the plan, would we be losing half of that space as part of the hotel construction?
Yeah, that's correct. So about half the food forest and half of Hal Ramley Park goes into that parking lot for the hotel.
Yeah. I guess I just think what's best for the hotel is best for the city. And I agree, I understand what you're saying as far as visibility from the street and those kinds of issues. But I also see it as an opportunity to build fresh, maybe somewhere else, to meet our needs. I'm not crazy about the food trailer thing. I just don't know that there's enough business there in that area and whether or not they could survive economically. And I think for special occasions and maybe during the Little League baseball season, those kinds of things, if there's a hookup and they can come in and operate when it's beneficial to them and economically feasible for them, but to have a permanent site, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I was kind of envisioning it as like temporary, just coming in on weekends or during the summer, whenever, like not having permanent food trucks there all the time. That was my thought, at least. Brandon, did you say that you had ideas for where to move the community garden?
Yeah, we'd been discussing, we actually own a piece of property right below here. And with just the food forest, it would depend on what we would want with the community garden, if we want to do raised beds. But the help house is right over there. The garden club, actually, they meet in this church right here, and that would put it approximately a block and a half away from the PD. There is water, electricity hookups on the street that we would have power and water. That was an idea that we had. If we did raised beds, we could kind of keep that a little cleaner and produce sight lines for PD. We would have the opportunity to put in electricity as well and lights to illuminate the space. That was kind of our idea, working with what we have right now.
And that's this lot right now?
Yes, sir. Yep.
Do we have any other comments, questions?
Again, I think I want to.
Hey, Eric, sorry. Will you make sure your mic's on?
Oh, you've got to push buttons. Sorry. So you got to be smarter than a microphone. And since I'm not, you could just disregard everything I just said. No, I want to just echo what Tom said. I think working to allow the hotel to have the flexibility to make that development look really nice and to kind of be an anchor and cornerstone to that Pioneer corridor would be judicious of us, and doing what we can in order to make that happen, I think would be very smart. And I think also knowing too that the baseball fields, I think, aren't going to be there for forever. Hopefully, we're able to relocate those to a new location, some better sports complex. And so we don't marry ourselves either to what kind of amenities we can invest in to put there would probably be wise, knowing that I think we have the long-range vision of building a sports complex with baseball fields that really actually measure up to the modern standard, rather than what we have now, which is in need of lots of love. And even though we're giving it the attention that it needs, it's going to be a constant, I think, battle to try to bring those to where they need to be, and a losing battle long-term.
With the baseball fields, we're looking at how many more years of use with those? Approximately.
Say that again, how many more
Well,
years, what?
We're talking about moving the baseball fields. That's what Eric was referring to. How many more years are we getting out of these baseball fields at Windjammer, do we think? Or is it dependent on when we get a rec center built or something like that?
Yeah, so moving the ball fields or removing the ball fields was one of the things that came out of the survey for improvements at Windjammer Park. The concept was to put in a events great lawn there. There's no time frame on when to do that. I think the idea was when we built out the regional sports complex up at Harbor Heights, we would then do that transition. Since that project got put on hold and we're kind of looking at other options, that move is also on hold. Since we don't have any kind of time frame yet on the scheduling, we're just working on making improvements to the ball fields right now. So it's on the radar, but I have no idea of when that would happen. It would happen in conjunction we do the larger sports park. Even then, I think this commission will need to have some discussion on, is that the right use of that space? What's the highest and best use of the space? Is it a great lawn for events? Should it remain ball fields? How much investment should we put in? Braden's doing an infield improvement. His crew has done a lot of work with making the fields safer and more playable. There's still a lot of work that needs to be done out there, though. We went after a local park maintenance grant to redo the dugouts and all the facilities there. We ended up being right at the cutoff for it, but if they do the local parks maintenance grant again this year, which is very likely, we'll go after it again. So our priority right now is to improve the ball fields as if they're not going away, but that'll have to be a future discussion.
This kind of segues into something that's not on the agenda for today, and that's the feasibility study. I still have questions about that. We don't need to discuss it now, but I still have questions about the feasibility study and what the scope of that is going to be. Is that going to include just an indoor facility? Is it going to include soccer fields? Is it going to include baseball fields? So I think that's something we're going to have to address sooner or later if we secure the money for the
So
feasibility
I will
study.
cover that in the director's items.
Okay, great.
And I have more information for you on that.
Okay, thank you.
And I apologize for sort of bringing up the moving of the baseball field, but I sort of, when we look at a lot of this, I think we're kind of behind as far as improvement. So when we look at one improvement, there's often another domino that's tied into it. And so I'm seeing sort of the string of problems that are, or let's just call them improvement places, that are all sort of tied together. So when we look at one development, we see that we have another problem that's adjacent to, that needs to be addressed. And in my mind, that's why I'm bringing these issues up, because I do think that we have to sort of progress in this manner, and knowing that we're just a little bit behind the eight ball as far as improving and bringing facilities up to standard for our community. There's a little bit of sense of urgency, but there's also a little bit of everything is just sort of interconnected at this point, that everything is tied together in such a way that when we do one thing, whether or not it's parks related or not, it does impact parks. And then something needs to be done in order to either adapt, improvise, overcome, mitigate, and challenge ourselves to some creative thinking so that we can, make improvements across all levels rather than improving at one area to diminish another. And especially since parks has seen a lot of diminishment over the last little bit, we have a lot of things that are just struggling to be useful or be beautiful, if we can even use that word for most of our parks. And so that's why I'm bringing that up. I'm not trying to cause more challenge, but I do see that all these challenges and opportunities are interrelated in some way.
Yeah, we have so much deferred maintenance. So now with the creation of the new Parks and Recreation Department, there's a lot of, obviously a lot of momentum and energy. We've added on so many staff, like 6 new positions in the last year. And so, we have the resources now. We're about to go through a lot of the budgeting. We've brought in like $3 million in grants in the last year. So, and Bob is just now starting on some of those beautification projects. Brandon's getting to work on renovation of the fields now that we have Craig on. He'll also help us with getting a better sense of the community needs for sport spaces, and he'll be in on some of the planning for the additional soccer fields as well as the sports park planning. And then we'll get into the feasibility study with the rec center and what does that look like. There are 1,001 priorities,
Yeah.
as you guys know, we've gone through the work sessions. So when we get into the budget season, budget equals implementation. So that's really where we're going to have keep refining that down to, okay, what is it that we will accomplish in this next year? And we want to make sure that council's on board with giving us the budget to complete this year. What are those highest priorities that need to happen now, next year? And then the Parks and Recreation Master Plan will really give us a roadmap for the next 5 years. But we're going to have kind of what are the immediate needs discussions here in the next few months as we budget for the biennial budget.
Yeah, and please don't hear what I'm not saying. I think it's a exciting and positive time. I think there's a lot of really excellent things going on with a lot of really excellent people now. I see a lot of opportunities, and that's exciting. It's also figuring out how to balance short-term with long-term vision. But anyway, I think it's exciting and fun. I just want to make sure that we recognize that when we start the domino rally, that we have to take into account all the other things that are going to fall rather than just the first things that are top of mind or that come across the table.
Okay, do we have any more comments, questions on that item? Okay, let's move on to item D, budget prep training.
Okay. I did want to just check in with Kay. I know she stepped away. Just want to make sure we check in on her to see if she has any comments on any of these discussion items. Let me share my screen again here with you.
And Brian, real quick, is it possible that we get an email of that little pictorial that you showed for the hotel and the park?
Sure, yeah, I can send that out.
All right, thank you.
Okay, this was a training that was done for our municipal council as we get ready for budget season. I thought I had a lot of good information that would be beneficial to you as a commission as we talk about some of those budgeting priorities and kind of what your guys' role is, what council's role is, what staff's role is, helping you out a little bit with some of the terminology, the different funds that are available to pull money from for projects, what those requirements are with our municipal budgets, go a little bit over some of the best practices and our budget policies, how to get the most out of the budget process, and some additional resources. I'll go through this fairly quickly. I might send this out to you guys, and because we will talk a little more in depth on this training as well as budget items in the workshops as well. So, but if you have questions, go ahead and just stop me. I haven't really gone through this a whole lot since we did the training, so I'm just going to kind of read off a lot of this stuff with you here. But just a little bit of terminology as far as how the budget is put together. So GFOA is the Government Finance Officers Association, and David Goldman, our Deputy City Administrator, helps. He actually sits on the actual organization. Do you remember the name of it?
It's the National League of Cities, there's a
Yeah.
finance organization.
Yeah. So there's a finance board for National League of Cities that David sits on. He's pretty knowledgeable and very involved with setting some of these standards. So policy role is really what the council and ultimately the commissions, the advisory commissions that give recommendations to council, is the role that you guys play. The operational role, the how, with what, who, is by city staff, right? So the departments and our staff are the ones that implement that will bring a lot of those items for consideration to the commissions as well as the council. And finance's role is, okay, which resources do we pull from, and making sure that we are financially viable as a city, that we stay within policy and within the scope. And then communication is also really important, especially with the community. And I think this is something that the city, with all the new leadership that the city has and all the transition that's been happening, is a big focus on being very transparent and having better engagement with the community, especially in the areas of parks and recreation, which is a new area that we're starting to do a lot of work around. So the policymakers council, as well as the advisory commissions, make the policy. They provide guidance at the beginning of the process. They confirm the budgets, that they also, through the adoption, that they meet the direction that we want to go through the process. And then they make sure that there's conformity and that we have the right results. And they base that off of priorities that they set. And they had a retreat last month to talk a little bit about that. They did this PowerPoint and then had a little bit of time to talk about what their main priorities were. I think originally, previously they had set about 26 or 32 priorities. They went through an exercise to try and whittle those down to sort of a top 6. Parks and recreation facilities was tied with a few others at number 2. That was pretty high on the list. The mayor, as well as the deputy city managers, and the mayor acts as a city manager in a strong mayor form of government. And also, just to give you an update, Sabrina Combs has been named as the interim city administrator while we're going through that transition process. So they proposed a policy at the beginning. They developed the organizational strategy that we want to implement. And then each of the departments are responsible for developing the operational strategy. What are our needs? What are the resources we need? What are the projects that we're seeing? We go and do needs assessments, planning efforts, different things like that to give that information back to the policymakers. And we're accountable for the day-to-day. The public, who are our stakeholders, observes the results. We work with them in engagement to identify what the priorities are. They come and give public comment on, hey, we need a new recreation center. Hey, we need more ball fields. Hey, we're seeing a lot of graffiti that we want to make sure is addressed. So we can put that into the budget and make sure that those priorities are listed there. The reporting pyramid is ultimately the citizens are who we all report to and are responsible to, is the public. And then you have council, who represent the people that are elected officials that handle the policy and accountability for passing that budget. The mayor and his executive team provide that organizational management, provide those reports to council, give that high-level data and briefings to make sure that council are making good informed decisions, as well as the commissions, that you guys can give those recommendations on budget direction to council. And then as staff, the department directors manage the functional areas. We provide that reporting to the administration and do the mid-level data. We act very much as the back and forth, the flow of information from the policymakers and the executive to the staff in direction of implementing the work and then bring those results back, as well as working with the public on needs assessments and making sure that the efforts that we put forward are community-led. It shouldn't be just because Brian thinks it's a good idea, but because we have a community that, hey, we've made our voice heard, this is what we want to see happen. And then our managers and supervisors, like the gentleman to our side of me, handles the project management. They're responsible for line item level of those budgets and those transactions and implementing the day-to-day procurement and implementation of our programs. So a couple accounting terms to be aware of that you might have heard, that if you have not heard, you will hear definitely in this process, but you might have heard staff refer to as BARS codes. So that is budgeting, accounting, and reporting systems that's established by the state. We have to use specific accounting numbers when coding purchases and procurement for various items. That is so that there is a uniform reporting back to the state that oversees how municipal budgets are being handled. GAAP, which you might be familiar with, is generally accepted accounting principles, which our finance department uses. There's various ways to develop a budget from what they call zero-based budgeting or program performance-based budgeting. Some do an annual incremental budget, which usually tries to keep up with inflation, cost of living, usually like adding on a 3%. The city is changing the way that we're doing budgeting this year, and we'll talk a little bit more in depth in the workshops on that. Cash basis or OCBOA, which is other comprehensive basis for accounting. And then there's a BARS manual for both of those that the city uses. So like I mentioned, BARS is the state auditor uses that to make sure there's a uniform procedure for doing that reporting, provides a common chart of accounts for us to be able to do comparable statistics. A couple other accounting terms to be aware of: appropriation, which is our legal authorization granted by council for expenditures. So when we say appropriated funds, that means that council has already approved the expenditures of those funds for that project. We don't necessarily need to go back to council to get that budget. We would just go back to them for execution of contracts or things like that. Reserve fund balance is balance that's not available for appropriation because it's legally restricted. That's kind of our rainy day fund, can only be used for very specific things. And then we have an unreserved fund balance. So that's kind of our cash ending fund balance. That's available for appropriation. Funds like REITs, our park impact fees, our marina, which is an enterprise fund, those will have carryover or rollover funds that will have both reserved and unreserved or unrestricted fund balances. The Creative Arts Fund is another example of that, which you guys use in conjunction with the Arts Commission. Interfund transfer, that's just simply a flow of assets, return without a requirement to repay that. So, for instance, Brandon will pay an interfund transfer for chargebacks like facilities, fleet expenditures, things like that. An interfund loan, similar thing, but that would be paid back if the marina were to do an interfund loan from the general fund for like dredging, and then they would pay back the city on those monies that are given over. The general obligation debt. We have uses of property tax as revenues for that. So you might hear the term general obligation bond, which is a funding mechanism often used for recreational facilities. And then revenue debt typically associated with proprietary funds, and there's a repayment obligation with that, with user fees. So fund accounting, government accounting systems are organized by operating on a fund basis, used to separate out the different resources related to those specific activities, and separate out restricted resources. It's defined as a fiscal and accounting entity with a self-balancing set of accounts. So here's some of the fund types. We have our general fund. We might have special revenue funds. REIT tax is part of that. Impact fees for parks, debt service, general obligations, capital projects, things like that. All part of that general fund. Proprietary funds are going to be our enterprise funds, like our utilities. The marina is also an enterprise fund. We have a few internal services as well. Print shop, equipment rental, things like that, and unemployment compensation. And then there's fiduciary, and so that's things like trusts, pensions, different things like that. And this is how those funds are broken out. General fund, special revenues, senior services was part of that. Senior services is going under general fund. Now, capital projects, you'll hear a lot about REIT 1 and 2, which are often used for maintenance and improvement projects, as well as a lot of our capital projects. Windjammer Park is also part of that. REIT 2 is very restrictive, much more restrictive than REIT 1, but it can be used for parks. Is one of the few uses it's used for, and so because it's so restricted, that's one of the funds that we go to first to use before we go to general fund, fund balance for capital projects and things like that. And then proprietary funds is talked about. So general fund, which is really our current budget or expenses, is our chief operating fund used by the city. It's used to account for all financial resources except those required to be accounted for in another fund. So not everything is in other funds. Special revenue funds like the REIT, real estate excise tax is what that stands for. Hotel tax, street funds, things like that. Capital projects account for our resources to use for acquisition or construction of major capital facilities. Typically, I think, anything over 5,000, we might look at capitalizing that. Doesn't include capital facilities financed by proprietary or trust funds. For instance, some redevelopment of the marina is an example of that. And then debt service is just that accumulation of resources for payment of long-term principal and interest in debt payments, like for a general obligation bond. So the primary resources that go into supplying the revenues for that are property taxes, retail sales tax, utility taxes. The arts fund comes out of utility taxes. We have a lot of cities that will use sales tax for different recreational things, like they might call it like a RAP tax, Recreation, Arts, and Parks tax, right? Which would take like maybe a 1/10 of 1% of sales tax. So like, a penny on every $100 goes towards maintenance and capital projects for Parks and Recreation. That's something that we can look at. Charges for services, like our permits, rental fees, different things like that. Restricted funds, the restricted revenues and funds need to stay separate, so we don't transfer those. Enterprise funds are similar to private businesses. We don't subsidize them with general funds. Usually that's done by a loan mechanism if we need to transfer funds. They account for operations of finance through user fees. The marina operates primarily off of its slip lease fees and transient mortgage. So some of those proprietary fund revenue sources, charge for services usually tends to be a big part of it. There's different ways. If we were to build a recreation center, there's various ways of doing that. It might be under the general fund. A lot of them are under things like special revenue funds, where it's based off of user fees. Might have a subsidy from the city. Most rec centers operate off of a 50 to 60% subsidy. There are some that are completely unsubsidized. Usually the size of the recreation center dictates that. The only rec center that I had worked with that was not subsidized by the city, that was an enterprise fund, was a Recplex, which is the largest recreation center in the country. The Provo Recreation Center operated as a special revenue fund. They were self-sustaining after 3 years. The Glenwood Springs Community Center had to continually be funded. We got it up as high as 70% self-sustained through user fees, but they had a real issue because it was not built large enough to have enough members to be able to support that. So that's something that you'll want to think about when we do the planning, is what kind of fund should this facility be, how is it going to be sustained? Rental fees that we get for our park spaces are another kind of revenue type. Trust funds, a lot of times you'll have a conservation trust that might be put together as part of one of the conservation futures properties that we get from the county. Right now we're looking at procuring some from the county around Fred Marsh, because those can only be used for undeveloped recreation naturalized spaces. They don't really have a good revenue source, and so there might be a trust fund through a land trust that will help provide for maintenance of that. A lot of times city-operated cemeteries will have a trust fund for perpetual maintenance. Key elements in our city financing, budgeting, so appropriation ordinances for immediate needs, strategic planning for the longer term. Parks and Recreation Master Plan will help us kind of look at what we will want to budget for over the next 5 years. Reporting, both internal and external, make sure that we're transparent. Oversight, that's done by finance for our internal controls. And we really look at that for 3 to 10 years, sometimes as much as 20, depending, but we have a comprehensive plan that we base a lot of that off of. So budgeting, the budget really is an economic plan that focuses on our financial and human resources to enact and implement the goals and priorities that you and council make. It establishes a biennial. So here in Washington, we have a 2-year budget, which makes budgeting very challenging, especially for programmers, because really you are looking at 3 years into the future. Okay, what are we going to be doing? And things like programming, recreational programming, can be very organic in how we develop new programs, or we end up not doing other programs. A lot of it is off of trends and the wants and needs of the community, and those change. So we do have a mechanism for going and doing budget amendments, which finance does, I think, about quarterly. Well, they'll go and make shifts to that. So if we get, for instance, grant funding, we got $1.7 million in the forestry management grant. So that's going to fund a forestry plan, as well as 5 major projects. Just a lot of work that Brandon's going to be able to do along with additional staff. Those are things that weren't expected for or appropriated in the budget in this last biennial. So we'll go and do a budget amendment to include those. Budgeting mission. So this basically is a statement that helps the policymakers make informed choices about the provisions of services and capital assets. Really making sure everyone's on the same page with, okay, what is it that we're trying to achieve? What are the major areas of priorities that we want to make sure are incorporated and identified, and we are communicating to the public on what it is that this budget will accomplish over the next 2 years. And we want to make sure that we promote the public's participation in that process. A strategic financial plan is long-term financial provides long-term financial stability. Make sure that it incorporates taxpayer interests. That we have transparency in that. We want to have conservative estimates, so we don't like going back to council to say, okay, we had estimated for this amount, we need more money, it was low. We do try to estimate high, so we don't have to do that. It's always better to say, hey, guess what, we saved money, it wasn't going to be as expensive as we thought. Okay, budget policy. So topics to consider with that is the type of budget. Like I mentioned, we're looking at changing from what had been an incremental budget format to a program budget format. And I think we actually came up with a name for it, right? Program performance budget, something like that. So how we, it's a form of zero-based budgeting, which basically what that is instead of looking at, okay, this is what we've done previously, let's tweak it a little bit and kind of keep it going, it sort of restarts. It starts from scratch and says, okay, well, what do we know are our needs? You know, maybe there's a better way to do this than what we've done previously. So it sort of rebuilds the budget each time. That requires a little more effort. It's a little more front-loaded in the amount of work that goes into it. But a lot of cities find that you have a more accurate budget, and you find a lot of cost savings. So instead of getting a lot of padded line items sometimes with incremental increases, you're able to look at, okay, this is what we want to achieve this year, and this is how we're going to track the implementation of those programs and how we budget to that. Fund balance targets, how we amend the budget throughout that process of the 2 years, what the approach for the budgeting calendar looks like, and then looking at fees and user charges. They gave an example here of the city of Redmond. Oh, you can look at that when I send it out. A little more on type of budget. So line item is typical financial structure oriented. Zero-based, like I mentioned, is a little different. It's not as widely used by cities. There's a lot of different versions of zero-based budgeting. It's more of an outcome-based budget, also known as priority-based or budgeting for outcomes. It just identifies the intended outcomes or results that you want to achieve with that. So Redmond and Renton are using this approach, and we're kind of looking at that and analyzing, and that's the direction that we're looking at going. It uses performance data to inform the analysis and the decisions of what we end up budgeting for. We do have a budgeting calendar. Some of that is set by Washington law on when we need to have some of those benchmarks and submit the budget. So we have some of our pre-budget items. The retreat that we had with council last month was the first step in that. In September, all the departments have their budget requests in. The departments prepared those estimates. As well, through September, we have council go through the calculations of those budget estimates and work with the clerk in October. They file those by the department heads, and the mayor shows the complete financial program. We have public hearings about mid-October on revenue sources, including possible increases to property taxes. Property tax is a very unpopular tax, so we try not to do anything that affects that. Utility taxes also are very high in the city, so we're looking at ways to restructure debt service to bring those utility taxes down right now, and David's doing a great job with that. In November, on the 2nd, is when the mayor prepares the preliminary budget and the budget message and files that with the clerk and council. And then also in November is when we do the public hearings on the preliminary budget. Copies of the budget go out and are available to the public at the end of November. Any property tax levies are set by ordinance and filed with the county. And then there's a final budget hearing on December 4th, and the budget is adopted at the end of the year. And here's kind of Redmond's calendar for how they go through that. So, again, what we're planning here for our budgeting calendar and upcoming council priority actions. Let's see, we'll move on here. Reserves, we do get some questions sometimes about fund balance and what's the recommended level to keep reserves at. The answer, there's not a great answer. It kind of depends. A lot of it is the forecast for any recessions or, how's the economy doing? Do we need to kind of prepare for any rainy days, or do we know that there's going to be major projects like, the marina redevelopment that has to happen? That's not going to all happen off of user fees there. The city's going to have to somehow assist with that. We're working with the county as well as the state, and our federal relations team is helping us with congressional help for some of those. But if we know that there's going to be major projects, we'll build up some of those reserves for that. Best practice is, 2 months out of kind of a savings there for operational funds, 3 months out for utilities and other enterprise funds. We usually keep about 20% for some of our public work department funds. And then general fund stabilization reserves is usually about 10% of general fund revenues. Sometimes that can be as high as 30%, depending on the city and what the economic climate looks like. So operations, basically translating the policy into guidance for implementation at the department level. Organizational charts are part of that, looking at how we're structured and what our resource needs are. Department descriptions will also have information on our goals, accomplishments, performance, analytics, things like that. The financial element will have the strategic financial plan. We'll use sources and uses of the funds, operating unit budgets by department and divisions, recreation, parks, and marina for parks and recreation. Description of the revenues, long-term range forecasts. And then it'll be broken out by category. So the city budget will look something like this. You'll have revenue sources as well as major areas for expenses, broken out between general fund revenue, debt service, capital, enterprise fund, internal service, and then you'll have grand totals. So that's kind of how you read the budgets. You'll see our department budgets look kind of similar to this. Usually they'll have the line items there on the left-hand category. It'll show our revenues as well as expenditures by line item. Except with the columns, we usually will have actuals from the previous year budget, what the budget is appropriated for in this year, if there's been any tweaking of that, and then year-to-date expenditures, and then we'll have totals as well as a percentage of how much of that budget has been spent in the department to date.
Brian,
Yes.
is there a clear way to view like interdepartmental billing, or which I assume takes place both for labor, and for equipment usage?
Yeah, that's a great question, and something that we ask finance about a lot, because currently it's not very clear. It has it all just kind of lumped in, and that's probably the biggest question I get from the managers and supervisors of the divisions is, okay, this is a big portion of me taking out my budget. What's that going towards?
Right.
And it could be anything from like fleet, facilities, engineering services for capital projects. We are implementing a new ERP, which is an enterprise resource program. It's a new financial software that should make it easier to print out those reports that show details on where all those monies are going towards. So that's something that we hope will be a little more transparent when we implement that program, and we can report on that a little better.
Okay. Yeah, I think that'd be very useful for, I think, projecting FTE too, just as far as figuring out, because I know I see parks guys sometimes working with roads and vice versa and different things like that, understanding, especially as we bring new things in or modify and change, you know, trying to project that, especially when we have to go across a couple of years,
Yeah.
and knowing that, you know, pickleball and a new park activation, you know, being able to manage that more accurately, not to
Yeah.
mention equipment costs and a variety of other things.
Yeah, some of it can be forecasted because we know we have like so many vehicles that usually require this amount of maintenance, or we have, you know, regular preventive maintenance of facilities. But other things are dependent on our activities, like engineering costs, right? So that's really based off how many projects are we doing, how engineering internally, internal planning heavy is that, and those can fluctuate pretty greatly, right? So having a better way to see that in real time, which we really don't right now. There's kind of some complicated equations that go into how they calculate out that.
Yeah.
But David Goldman's been working a lot on trying to simplify that and making sure that we're being charged for actual work done instead of like a percentage or
Sure.
something like that.
Yeah, I think also in relation to equipment and equipment required in order to maintain new and emerging parks and or replacing, you know, making sure that that the staff actually has the tools rather than having to rent them from another department in order to get the work done, which just creates another obstacle, I think, to efficiency and productivity,
Yeah.
if it's needed.
Yeah.
You know, if we can understand a way in which it's needed in the budget.
And it also helps us make better decisions on how we operate, right? So, like, for instance, while we do want to use our internal services, you know, they're very short-staffed as well, like everyone else in the city. And so beyond their ability to respond and address, you know, maintenance or like equipment needs in a timely manner, what's the cost, right? Does it just make sense to use a private business to handle some, you know, maintenance on a vehicle versus putting it in and having it at a higher cost and taking longer? So it just allows us to make better decisions on how we're doing some of those things.
Do we have considerations in the budget already for subcontractors? And
Yeah,
and
we do have a
departmentally?
professional services line
Okay.
that we use, and Parks does use subcontractors for, you know, different maintenance projects.
Do we have
fairly
a
regularly.
a grid or a paradigm for understanding when that's required, or is it just kind of ad hoc based on situationally? Like,
Kind of depends. I don't know if there's a clear, part of it is timing. You know, like, for instance, at least with parks, you know, Brandon's crews are much more involved with daily maintenance in the springtime during the growing season. There's a lot more mowing operations that have to happen. So we might not have as much staff hours to do special projects or things like that, where, you know, it just makes sense to bring someone on. You know, a similar question was asked about, like, for the wood chips, you know. Does it make sense to have a contractor come and blow it in versus staff coming and taking the time out? And that's just something that we have to look at and calculate it out. How long is it going to take? What are the other needs on Brandon's plate? So sometimes it just makes sense to pay a little more and have a little more help.
and I guess that's what my question was getting to, is do we have some, or would it be in our best interest to think about when we're budgeting to building a paradigm to this nature that says, okay, we have a seasonality factor, also with the cost and you know, person hours required in order to get the work done. And then the decision's made for us based on the grid that we make, and then we know when to hire so that we're not caught in the, you know, in an in-between. We basically make a rubric to help us make the decision so that, and then we can budget to it, knowing that in the spring season, we're going to have such and such, and then we're going to be dealing with so many water issues for backup storm drains and stuff in the rainy season, so we know we're not going to get to windfalls or something, and so we're going to have a tree service on hand. Or do you,
I think for regular preventive maintenance, that definitely could be something we're looking at. And Brandon right now is looking at an asset management program along with the marina that helps to identify staff and maintenance hours, you know, schedule out preventative maintenance. It'll give him better information on where are we spending our time. And so I think once we get to that point and we have that data, probably be pretty easy to create a matrix for those preventive maintenance things. As far as like the capital projects things, they'll probably have to stay sort of as a just case-by-case basis, just depending, again, on the timing and the scope of the project. And
Yeah, and I'm not trying to overcomplexify. I think my concern is that simply that we just don't force the staff that's already shorthanded to get behind and then feel like, you know, they took on, let's just say, the wood chip project because we decided to, but now they're behind on the mowing and we got folks complaining about them because soccer practice and the ball's not rolling. Whatever, that we have as something to help them be ahead rather than, I think, what the history has been of sort of chasing their tail a little bit, just trying to keep up.
I think part of it
And
also,
eliminating burnout.
at least previously, has been the parks budget is very skeletal. So we've worked hard to get grant funds to help boost that up. We're also looking at other alternative revenue sources to boost the general fund for parks maintenance. So they really haven't had like the financial resources to do a whole lot of subcontracting, but they do have a professional services line. It's not broken out yet. We're going to be restructuring the budget, and that's something that we'll want to look at when we get to the professional services part is, you know, do we know that we're going to want to have certain subs for certain activities throughout the year? So a matrix like you're suggesting would be a good tool for that. Reporting. Okay. Helps us to look at budget comparisons. How are we doing year-to-date expenditures compared to actuals of previous years? Understanding what the variables are, like we were just talking about. You have kind of this pyramid, policy level, senior staff, mid-level staff, line staff level transactions. Fund balance. Do you have the funds with cash flow? Are there any issues? Do we need to adjust that fund balance level? If we know that we're bringing in extra revenues, how do we allocate those out? For instance, the Creative Arts Fund, you know, we bring in approximately about $60,000 a year. That had not really been appropriated out every year. They've only been doing about $20,000 of that, so it's been slowly creating a larger fund balance. And that's something that council's had concern about, so we're looking at line iteming out at least that full appropriation, and then what are some of the projects that we can do to bring that fund balance down a little bit and make good use of that those funds. And debt analysis. Something else that we'll look at, especially now with the new recreation division, is another sort of pyramid equation for cost recovery. And basically what that looks like is what are the direct expenditures that, you know, Craig will be doing with his programs, supplies, any non-volunteer staff, marketing, you know, part of Craig's salary, overhead, administration, all those kind of different things. What are our expenditures? What are the participation levels, user fees, and then finding a appropriate percentage of subsidy if needed. And that question of policy really is based off of how much good is it doing for how many people, right? So for instance, a special event, which is open to the public, we want as many people to participate. We don't want barriers to participation. Maybe a program for kids with special needs, or a senior program, or things like that, are something that we would want to more subsidize. Even though it's a smaller niche group, the category of the good it does for the public is something that we want to support. Versus maybe something like a sports league, right? More of a niche population. It's more individual benefit, and the population that we have that are participating in that, it makes more sense to have a higher return recovery. So we try to aim for cost recovery at 100%. Things like sports leagues might be as high as 150%, where maybe an adaptive program, might only be 30%, and we subsidize that by 70% with revenues from other areas or the general fund. Or maybe a special event, we go after a few sponsors, but maybe we're not trying to quite reach the cost of it. Those are all sort of policy decisions we make, but basically that's what a cost recovery pyramid might look like. You look at how much good for how many people versus individual benefit, and then you have a higher cost recovery at the top and maybe a lower cost recovery or subsidy at the bottom. So based on those general accounting principles, a fiscal foundations framework, things you want to look at are establishing a long-term vision, build trust and open communication, engage the community as stakeholders in the process, use collaborative and collective decision-making, create very clear rules, treat everyone fairly. A little bit of briefly about the State Auditor's Office. So the SAO, established by state constitution, dictates a lot of how this budget process goes. Audits are on all state and local governments. Oak Harbor's audit recently completed as clean with no findings. The RCWs state that the auditor's office shall prescribe the accounting and reporting to be used by governmental agencies, so that's where we get the BARS codes that we have to use, and Center for Government Innovation, which is also called the Center. We work with them quite a bit. A couple of resources that you might hear us talk about. AWC is a organization of Washington cities. They do a lot of training. They have a great website that provides resources and a lot of answers to questions that we might have around different policies. If we want to enact revisions to codes, that's a great website for that. Also working with insurance and different things like that. MRSC is a municipal resource page that has a lot of information on financial policies and budgeting. They're just like AWC, also a lot of good trainings that they provide as well. The GFOA that we talked about provides publications, best practices, and does training for elected officials. And then the Washington State Auditor's Office also has a lot of good training. They have a help desk that works with our financial department. Any questions? That's just very quick, brief overview. Sometimes, going through all this can make your eyes glaze over a little bit, but it's good to understand, the basics of the process, especially like what funds are available for us to tap into when we're building capital projects. Like I said, we have a lot of needs, 1,001 things that we want to do. We're only going to be able to fit in so much into the actual implementation, right? So understanding the priorities and then looking at, well, how do we pay for this? What are funding mechanisms that we want to look at in the future for supporting the new Parks and Recreation Department? That could look like anything from a public facilities district, a metro special recreation district, even a port authority can support the marina and also can be used for recreational expenditures. So these are all kind of additional revenue sources we want to look at, as well as what is brought into, how much money is available every year in REIT funding, and how much money do we usually expect every year to come into like park impact fees. Park impact fees are slightly restricted in that they can only be used for expansion of services, not replacement. So you can't replace a playground, but if you were to expand it because we have a new neighborhood being developed and we need to provide more amenities or more services, those are the kind of improvements that those can be used for. So that's something to kind of keep in mind as well. Any questions on any of that? And like I said, we'll talk more about this in some of the workshops, so we'll have a little more time to get into the weeds about things, but yeah, any general questions for right now?
Yeah, I do. I have a lot of nitty-gritty questions that I won't get into now, but it looks like you have a department budget in the chart of accounts that's you, and so you get a monthly and year-to-date statement of some kind, like actual to budget statement?
Yeah, The finance department doesn't send us anything. We can go on at any time and pull a year-to-date report, and I've shown each of the division managers how to do that, just so they can kind of track where they are in the year and make sure that they're on target with their expenditures. We look and see, okay, here we're this percent through the year. Do we have any lines that either have very low percentage of use? Why haven't, what is it not being coded right, or why haven't we been spending out of that what we were planning to? Or things that are really high percentage. Okay, we know that, for instance, we do a lot of special projects in the wintertime in parks, right? So those line items might be very both front and end of year heavy, whereas a lot of our operational, custodial, rounds kind of preventive maintenance stuff is going to be primarily in the spring and summertime. So we won't see a lot of the expenditures in the beginning or the end of the year. Those can be pulled at any time. While the commission isn't a budget advisory or oversight commission, I'm happy to go over those with you if you guys are interested in seeing how the budget's being spent and you want to kind of understand our operations from a budgetary standpoint. We could do that on like a quarterly or a bi-yearly basis or anything like that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Brian. Let's go ahead and move on to item E, department projects list.
I will share my screen again, and this is kind of a part two to that discussion a little bit. The mayor is interested in putting together a matrix that tracks the status of projects in the city, and Mikhail and the other executive administrative staff are kind of helping with this. When Mikhail first sent me a notice of, hey, can you send me all the information and documents on your projects? Like my eyes crossed, like, oh man, that is a lot of information. I don't even know how I would do that. So we're stepping back a little bit, and I thought we'd just start out with just sort of listing, hey, here's what we're working on. Here's current projects and kind of the projects that are upcoming. So I'm going to make this bigger so you can actually read it. I thought I'd just run down this a little bit. I'll go through this fairly quickly just because we're going to start running out of time if I get too much in the weeds on all these. But if you have a specific question about the status of any one of these, go ahead and let me know, shout out. So I'll start with the Parks Division. So the Harbor Heights Trail, where right now we're working on the professional service agreement with Eric McCabe. I've asked him to split out the invoicing for the professional services versus the equipment. So we can do a purchasing request for the equipment and the professional service agreement for the design. That doesn't need to go back to council. We'll just have the mayor sign off on that agreement. I was hoping to have that done this last week. Should get that to him and to the mayor this week, and we can start on that development project. Smith Park improvements. So we just put in the new park monument sign, and it looks amazing. You should drive by there if you haven't seen it. It's pretty sharp. We'll probably do. I know Sabrina's working on a public service announcement about it. Maybe we'll do some kind of unveiling with the Gary Oak Society. You have to help me with his name.
This was Jay.
No, the Gary Oak Society that procured this stone.
Brad Duluth.
Brad Galuth. Yeah, Brad Galuth did a lot of work getting that sign to fruition. And we wanted to make sure that he was recognized for that. We also put in the little garden area for the Garden Club Centennial with the plaque on there. Future improvements, we'll eventually take out the playground equipment from there. I like to kind of time that with the installation of some new playgrounds around the community first, though. But the idea is to make Smith Park, since it's now on the historic registry, a little more historic looking, but very nice historic looking. So we'll make improvements to the pathway, put in electricity and some safety lighting at the pavilion, and just make it a really nice picnicky kind of a park. Windjammer improvements. I'll give you a whole little rundown of that one because I know there were some questions on it. So we had identified from the survey results, we had talked with commission last year about recommendations for the council on those priorities. We had 7 recommendations. Some of those are getting tweaked as we go along. The recommendations we gave to council were to repair the shoreline, enhance the pavilion for events, provide shaded areas, interpretive center improvements. So with the shoreline, we're hunting for grant funding, and to include that, we had some erosion issues at the park last year during the king tides. We're looking to add that to a larger city shoreline restoration project. For now, we're working with Fish and Wildlife. We have some sandbags in place that are kind of buried under there. We'll just monitor those and replace those as needed, and they've given us the green light to do that if those sandbags start breaking down, just to keep that shoreline protected. For the pavilions, our commission is looking at a future amphitheater project. Rather than making tweaks to the current sort of pavilion we have there, they really would like it set up to be able to do good concerts, a space for music in the park, things like that. Shaded areas, we're doing tree plantings right now with the new Forest Service grant and looking at shade structures. As well as the interpretive center, I'll work with Public Works and an architect for providing additional egress. We're doing some recreational programs out of there right now. We'd like to have that space more utilized by the public. And to do that, we just need to provide a restricted access to the interior of the clean water facility and then provide another egress for fire escape. Once we do that, then we can do more public rentals in that space. And it is a beautiful space. If you guys haven't been down there, you probably should do a tour. We're doing recreation programs down there right now, and it's been a great space for it. So it's been a successful implementation of that. Along with the Windjammer improvements, we are doing the ball fields. That goes to council next council meeting for the infield improvements. The splash park, Brandon's working with an electrician right now to implement the new pedestals. We're hoping to have that project done before we open the splash park, just before Memorial Day. Shoreline erosion, I mentioned. Playground chips, that was approved by council, and those start going in tomorrow. Pickleball courts, that goes to council for approval of the planning and design at the next council meeting. Utility wraps, our commission is working on that right now. We have that funding already approved by council. We're looking at improvements for Catalina Park. They had an interesting idea of putting in a mini golf course there, which is something I think that we'll pursue. That park is pretty underutilized. It's used by families that use the marina, but we'd like to pull more of the general public down there. There's so many interesting things to do at the marina for the general public. We have the salmon recovery program there where people can go down and help feed the salmon. It's super interesting. Elise, who is a marine biologist, loves meeting with families and the public, and we have school groups that go down there for trips, and she's amazing. She'll go around and show you all kinds of things. We were going with her, and she said, "Oh, look at this! I thought it was a piece of seaweed." She pulls it out. It's actually a form of a sea sponge. It's a little sea creature, and she's like, "Here, smell it," and it smells like a tropical drink. It was amazing. Just a lot of interesting things, and so that's one way that we've thought of helping pull the public down there. We're also looking at shoreline improvements there with a sandy beach. Howrah, which we talked about, and a new community garden location we're working on right now. Same with dog park planning. Our facilities committee has that on their list. We haven't really tackled improvements to the current one or additional locations, but it's something that we really need to look at, and possibly something we'll want to put in with Windjammer improvements. Installation of the remaining Kinnebrew collections. We got your guys' feedback on those, and we took that back to the Arts Commission. So they did finalize the location for the next piece, which will be right at that kind of trailhead to the Fred Marsh Trail. The angel statue, I actually have an update on that one I'll talk about a little later, but that's planned to go in before the Hydro for Heroes event in July. So we're working on that one, as well as a reconfiguration of the Flintstone Park. The flagpole is going to be, the flag staff is going to be relocated to the Veterans Memorial Park, and we'll do a special event around that to rededicate it with a new plaque. And then Brandon will do some reconfiguration of the park with the roundabout, taking that out and providing more green space there. The Gateway Park and the display jets at the entry of the city, which the city is responsible for, the maintenance of those. Navy takes care of one of them, we take care of the other, but we just do the maintenance all together. So we're going to be doing a improvement project where we'll be resurfacing and painting the jets this spring, probably about May. And then we do an annual cleaning with that. But we're also looking at a beautification of that area, possibly providing a parking location to do sort of a photo op, safe photo op location there, and that's something we're working with the Navy on. Inclusive playground, which we'll talk about here in a minute. Parks and Recreation Master Plan, we're putting the RFP together for that right now. Benches and table renovations, which,
It's close, so it's close.
how many have we done?
I have almost all of,
We've gotten almost all of the benches and tables that we can physically bring in. We're going out and doing the ones that are actually stationary out there as well. We've got, I think it's like 4 that are still, we could bring them in. We're just going to do them out in the field because they're in parks that need, that have stationary benches there, but they're almost done.
Brandon's crew's been working on that all winter. I think it's been like 60 or so tables and benches. It's a lot. 7th Avenue Trail, so this is a capital project that is planned for next year. So we'll be doing a trail study. We have funds that are already appropriated for that. And then the playgrounds. We had placeholders for that. All of them were unfunded. We want to push all that forward and start doing replacement of those. We had to remove one of the playgrounds that were just in such disrepair as a safety issue. And so I'm trying to move all those up. So that'll be a priority for us when we do the budgeting. Skate park was also included with the playground replacements. Part of that will be in with the recreation center planning, since we're looking at in that location is one of the prime locations for a new recreation center. Arts plan is going to council at the next council meeting for approval of that. The website we're working on right now, with all those improvements, we've gotten your guys' feedback on that. The parking lot on the west side is between Island County Resources, or Island Senior Resources, and the center. So we're looking at improvements of that. Right now, it's just a dirt area, right? So it gets very rutted and muddy. It's heavily used, especially on the congregant meal days. So we're looking at expanding the parking lot, maybe putting in some road base. It's probably going to be too cost prohibitive to asphalt all the whole area, but we're also looking at a larger parking lot improvement, grading that side out. And we're working with Senator Larson's office for some funding to do that. But we'll also want to look at the timing of that. That might coincide with a possible implementation and construction of a new recreation center anyway. So something we're looking at. A generator for the center, which acts as a cooling and a heating relief facility. And it's also a reunification site for the school, as well as one of the senior facilities nearby. So it really is sort of a like a Red Cross, emergency facility. So we're getting a generator to make sure that we can provide power and services in the event that we need to utilize it for that space. Also, I want to make sure that Craig never goes without internet. The marina, we have a new ice vendor. They're working towards going cashless, so we're changing up a number of systems there. Laundry room, same thing. They're looking at a new asset management system along with Brandon. We're working on the dredging project, which will include mitigation projects. So we have a number of what's called mitigation credits. So dredging is an environmental impact. To offset that, we have to do a number of projects equal to the impact of the dredging. So those will include removal of the sawdust sand barges, the removal of the hoist, the roofing structures out there. We're working with the Army Corps of Engineers, which we had a site visit with them a few weeks ago on the channel dredging, and then the redevelopment of the marina and replacement of the breakwater, as well as repair of a couple of those docks, which were damaged in the last storm. The long booms, we're also looking at new systems there, repair of cement, and power washing, sign replacements that need to happen, preventive maintenance of the power pedestals. Any improvements we do out there trigger a code compliance for electrical, and we would have to replace all the power pedestals when we do that. So we're trying to prepare for that. And then shoreline restoration, as I mentioned, with improvements to the Catalina Park, as well as additional staff. They're an enterprise fund, so that's going to be a major change in how we structure that budget. So that's just a real quick rundown of everything that's currently on our plate. We have some other capital projects that you know about that we're not quite there yet with, but that's kind of what's going to go into this matrix to take the status of each of those. We'd like to also put these on the website under our projects page, just to make sure that the community understands, hey, here's what's coming up, here's what's working on. Hey, we just got this huge grant, here's what we're going to be doing with that grant, like with the forestry management plan and, you know, those kind of things. So brief rundown. Any
We've
questions?
got a question.
Yes.
Yes.
Would you
Can you
mind
come to
coming
the
up just so we can get you on the mic,
Gotta say my name.
if you don't mind?
Okay, Melissa Stewart. I've been here for about 12 years with my 3 children and husband, and we frequent these parks a lot, so I'd like to see all of those on the list. You want to go back, actually? that might
Sure,
be helpful.
sorry.
You have the lagoon up on the list, but you didn't touch on it. Do you want to just
Oh, yeah.
briefly?
You bet.
That's why I'm here, actually.
Yeah. Where's my list? There we go. Where am I? Oh, you're right. I skipped ahead.
I'd love to hear what you
Sure,
have in your
yeah.
packet, so I don't have to reiterate.
Yeah, I actually missed a few of these. I can run through these real fast. So, Arbor Day is coming up. Forestry management plan. We're putting together the RFP for that, as well as the forestry projects. Bob's already started with a bunch of plantings. The Park Restoration Master Plan talked about benches. Portland Loos needs some repairs. The lagoon dock and the channel. So we have a SEPA that we're looking to get an exemption from. Let me bring up my notes on that. So for the lagoon, we're working on getting a determination of no significant impact from development services. And that is necessary in order to submit the hydraulic project application for to the Department of Fish and Wildlife. Everything else has been uploaded. And then we're just waiting on the SEPA determination. Once that's completed, we'll be able to go forward with the removal of the old dock and the installation of the new dock. I would love to get that done before the summer season. And that's what we're working on, but we're sort of beholden to the state and making sure that the SEPA determination is reviewed and brought back to us. So we're working. Gideon and I have been going back and forth with them this last week. I also touched base with Jared with Evans Marine Solutions, and we had the extension of their agreement extended out another 6 months. It was set to expire April 1st, and it looks like we probably won't get to construction before then. So we just put that out, but we did touch base with it. He did want to have a little more conversation on the material we end up using if we do the easy dock. There's a couple other options. I'll have to look back and see what originally was planned. I don't think there's a change in the cost if we do a different one. So I'm going to get a couple samples from him. His question was mostly on what would the SEPA require if they require a certain dock type. And he can work with us on any one of them. I think there's like 3 or 4 options. So we could probably put that on a future agenda just to talk about what the material looks like. The dock is planned it'll be kind of an L shape, and it'll be just to the west of where the current dock is. And part of our JARPA review with that includes the channel dredging. So staff go in and just clean out that channel so there's good flow of water during the high tide, and that keeps bacteria levels down and keeps the lagoon safe for swimming in. Do you have any other specific questions on that?
Okay, no, that sounds good. Just want to make sure that the dock does stay, since
Yeah.
there's a lot of kids that do love using that. And then potentially, I know last year, previous summers as well, access to the lagoon is a little difficult, just with like rocks and driftwood that stack up over the winter time. I think it was like late June or maybe early July when they got to that project last year. But even adding a thicker layer, maybe of sand, that would be more conducive to like younger families using the lagoon in that area. And then even if the potential of adding a second entrance point on the far side of, I guess that'd be the northern side, where there's like a big willow tree, that would be, it's a nice shady area. But for families to sit there, it's pretty steep. So just maybe looking at the perimeter of the lagoon as a couple entrance points where families can sit and enjoy the lagoon. It's such a great amenity to have. It's just a little rough around the edges right now. Just making it easier to access and having more sitting points for families to enjoy it. But yeah, great to hear there's going to be a new dock and still able to jump off of it quickly. Another option, you guys have never talked about this, but adding like a lifeguard to that location, just during certain times. Not expecting it to be the whole time when the splash pad is open, but just to kind of mitigate the rambunctiousness of some children and teenagers that are pushing and shoving and throwing boulders into the lagoon, just as kind of like a monitoring when there's other smaller children present as well that might just have this like, authority figure, and then of course safety too in the lagoon. It helps them, mothers a bit more comfortable be down there with their smaller children. And then, I don't know if you guys have thought about a goggle ball pit. You have one up by the swimming pool, I believe.
Sorry, say that again? A what?
The goggle ball pit. Have you guys, you have one up by the swimming pool? So
So-
it's like a big pit where children love this game. There's actually one on base. And you bring your own ball, and it's just this collaborative game played together. And it's actually pretty easy to install. My husband actually was going to do one for the schools. But that would be a possible recreation activity for children down at the Jammer. So just kind of putting that out on your radar and seeing if that's possible with some of the funds that we have limited. Yeah, and then Kimball Park, you guys know where that is. It's off of Heller and Lowerland area. Maybe additional playground equipment in that area. There's like 3 neighborhoods, big neighborhoods that convene in that area. It's right off the road. We go there quite frequently actually just because it's easy and close to our neighbors' neighborhood. Yeah, just adding those things up there.
Yeah, thanks for your feedback. Are you all right if I take a minute to respond to a couple of those? I love the ideas, and I always thought it would be great if we could put in some just sort of stair steps, kind of long seating steps for the lagoon. Since it's not technically shoreline, I think we are able to do something like that. We had talked about with the moving of the dock, we also have to move the path access as well. So it might be an opportunity to provide some of that at that time. The North Whidbey Pool Parks and Recreation District used to provide a lifeguard down at the lagoon at one time, I think. They also did like some kayak rentals or something like that. something that we could talk with them about. I know there are some liability issues. It's dark water and there's also, budget constraints with adding a staff member, but something that I'm happy to have some discussions with city administration and the district about, if there's any options there. The Kimball Park, so I live near there and I drive by that every day. I actually took Brandon, on his first day here, specifically by that park as an example of our pocket parks that are very old and tired. Equipment that was probably put in when the neighborhood was put in, right? And is that something that you drive by and you say, oh, that looks a little sketchy, or do you drive by and all the kids go, we have to go there? Okay, we'll definitely plan on going there this weekend. That looks awesome. So that's the reaction that I want to see when we redo all these parks and playgrounds is, take out the old 70s equipment that, you put sand on the scorching metal slide, or whatever, and really make them kind of themed, very accessible, just very attractive, very safe looking with a lot of amenities for picnics, barbecues, good updated playground equipment. Definitely a high priority for us, so appreciate your feedback on that.
Any other questions, comments on that? Okay. All right, thank you so much for your comments. Let's go ahead and move on to item F, inclusive regional playground.
Okay, I'm gonna go through this fairly quickly because we've had a heavy agenda today and we're kind of running out of time here, but all right. So this really talks a little bit about, our purpose, which is to build recreational facilities that are versatile and adaptable to meet the needs of all residents of the community, regardless of their, abilities. Our goal is to provide a well-rounded selection of recreation programs and activities that provide uplifting, healthful, enjoyable, and personally satisfying experience for Oak Harbor residents of all ages as well. So, one thing that immediately realized that this is an area that I wanted to focus on address when we created the Parks and Recreation Department was addressing underserved populations. Just a brief background on that, doing a snapshot survey, 9 out of 10 families felt that have a child with a special need or disability, felt that their child did not have the same opportunities to play as other children. Inclusive play isn't really about meeting special needs. It's about meeting all children's and young people's need to play wherever they choose in a variety of different ways. And not just children, but also, when we're looking at accessible facilities, also adults maybe that have special needs or limited mobility, grandparents that want to go with their kids to the playground and interact with them. Really what we're talking about is inclusive universal design. But when we talk about youth, it's difficult for children to grow up emotionally stable if they are denied spaces and freedom to take and overcome risks, and if they are denied the opportunity to make friends with others of their own age group in areas that they feel safe, they belong, and they have access to. Often youth find themselves on the outside looking in when they have needs that are not met with our facilities. The nearest inclusive playground, there actually used to be quite a ways away. It was, I think, like near Everett. There's a new one that was just built in, I have to help me with the name of it.
Linwood.
Linwood, thank you. Yes, Linwood. And that is now our closest universal design or accessible playground. Oak Harbor doesn't have an inclusive playground where people with disabilities can improve their physical, cognitive, social skills side by side with their able-bodied friends. So, these kids, like I said, are kind of on the outside looking in and missing out on crucial components to healthy, typical development. So what does an inclusive playground look like? Well, inclusive playground or universal design playground, adaptive playground, there's a lot of different naming for it. That's just semantics, but really what we're talking about is designing a space where all people of all abilities can come and recreate. So it will have accessible surfacing. So these are not wood chips or pea gravel, right? This is pour in place surfacing that a wheelchair or someone with limited mobility or balance issues can walk on. And it's also best practice surfacing for impact attenuation. It has exciting adaptive equipment that all people can use. A lot of playgrounds, they'll put in a platform and they'll put like a wheelchair swing and call that an accessible playground. It should have build in a way that you don't have a lot of vertical build out, that you have ramps instead of stairs, things like that. Has an inviting theme. The location is just as important as far as accessibility as the equipment you put in and the layout of the playground itself. Does it have good, adequate, accessible parking? Does it have good, accessible pathways to the playground? Is it nearby neighborhoods that would utilize it? There's almost always strong community support. These are softball pitch type projects, right? It's really easy to get behind these, and usually we see high utilization. We almost always refer to them as regional playgrounds because people literally will travel 100 miles to utilize a playground like this. My family, even though none of my kids have a special need or a disability, we would travel 50 minutes when we were living in Colorado from Glen Springs to Grand Junction to utilize their playground, just because it's just a good playground. So a couple different proposed locations. Like I said, it's a centralized park. Typically you want to have at the bare minimum 12,000, ideally something closer to 30,000 square feet for the playground. That you have handicap parking, ability to have enough handicap parking stalls there. It should be near other amenities and should be pedestrian friendly. A little bit about the funding for these. This is what I had put together for when we did the adaptive playground in Glenwood Springs. We went after $250,000 of grant funding, took some city capital funding with the match of that and some community donations. So that was pre-COVID, right? You can expect this to be literally double. I guarantee it's going to be literally double. So probably about 1.2 million is what we're looking at. We are applying for a Land Water Conservation Fund grant for $800,000. In Glenwood Springs, I got a $900,000 grant to do the playground there. We would match that with some probably refunding and possibly some community donations. These are, like I mentioned, a project that is easy for the community to get behind. They're real good, they're feel-good projects, right? And ultimately, this is our message. Working together, we can create an all-inclusive play environment and better our community. Parents and grandparents with disabilities would finally have the opportunity to join in on the joy that comes with bringing children to a playground once we create the best all-inclusive playground in Washington. And the first all-inclusive playground on Whidbey Island, because every child deserves to play. I am bringing this item to council at the, I think it's April 2nd. Let me double check here though. Let's see, we are bringing this, no, at the workshop, the March 27th workshop. Love to have you as a commission there in support of this. They don't normally do public comment at workshops. Sometimes they'll invite the public, but I'd love to just include maybe some comments from you guys since you are working on this project actively, especially in our Programs and Playgrounds Committee, to speak to this a little bit. I'll probably give a presentation similar to this. I'm going to tweak it a little bit, update some of the numbers, talk about the grants that we're going after. We've identified several different locations, but I think the west side of Windjammer is where we're going to target for this playground. It has everything we need as far as central location, parking to expand handicap parking stalls, already has some ADA pathways, and it'll be easy to connect that. ADA accessible restrooms, things like that, that we want to include in this. And it has an adequate footprint for it. So That's what we're going to be working on coming up with the workshop. If you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, we'll be working with the Playground and Programs Committee just to prepare for this presentation to council.
Excellent, thank you. Kate, did you have anything to add to that?
I could not be more enthusiastic than for that particular project. I just, if I was there, I'd be giving you a standing ovation right now, Brian. Just very excited about it.
All right, do we have any other questions or comments on that item? Okay. Let's go ahead and move on to item G, website update.
Okay, we'll breeze through a couple of these since we're kind of coming to end of time. We're working on the website updates. We're making improvements. We met and made a list and took your guys' feedback as well. I just got access from Mikhail to go in and make those edits, so we'll be working on that over the next couple of weeks. So I'll probably just plan on the next commission meeting we'll jump on the website and review it and see if there's any additional tweaks or feedback that you guys have at that point.
I just have one quick comment on that.
Yeah.
Since you're working on it actively. And it appears to be standard in all the departments that the first thing you see when you hit on Parks and Recreation, or Recreation and Leisure, I think it's called, you should see the mission statement and the objectives and all that. I'd like you to consider that not be the first thing you see, because I think if the public is going to that side, they want to get program information. They may not scroll down, they may not realize that there's program information there. It looks like just an administrative page. So anyway, just something to think about.
Yeah, that's great feedback. And I think, as we implement the Parks and Recreation Master Plan and we update all that kind of, here's our mission and all that kind of stuff, that can all really be put on a page specifically with that plan. Yeah, I agree.
Okay. Any other questions about that? All right. Let's go ahead and move on to item H, Blarney Stone Special Event Planning.
I'm going to kick this over to you, Brandon, if that's all right. You want to talk a little bit about this?
Sure. The Main Street Association has requested us to move the Blarney Stone. It is currently located at Windjammer Park, right next to the clean water facility. They're requesting that we move the Blarney Stone. They would like to remove the tree that's in Pioneer, the Christmas tree, and put the Blarney Stone there, and then get a fake Christmas tree with a ring that goes around the Blarney Stone. So it would just be a layers of rings that they want to start building up and have a Christmas tree there. Our thought was to do a little retaining wall seating area there. The box around the tree doesn't look the best, and that's what we're trying to get out of there. So if we would do a retaining wall, I'm being told that there is music outside every Friday during the summer, right outside there. That would give us three. If it was built correctly, 2 to 3 inch or 2 to 3 foot retaining wall with a capstone on top of it, that would actually retain the dirt inside so that we could remove the box. That would beautify the tree, and then it would actually increase the seating around. I don't know how many people are down there, if there is a need for more seating. That was kind of the idea that I had. But the Blarney Stone, they would like to move that for St. Patrick's Day specifically. I guess in the past there had been a parade down Pioneer Avenue, and the mayor would kiss the Blarney Stone. They can't do that now because the Blarney Stone has been moved. That is what we would like to discuss.
Can you clarify the rings and the tree? I didn't understand that.
Not extremely well. So there are fake trees that people make. It is basically it is a ring. So it's a hollow ring that you would put around, and it's just got branches sticking out of it, and that's one layer of the tree. So you would build up the tree with all those layers of branches and rings, and it would eventually go up to a point. It's a fake Christmas tree. The website that I looked at that she had suggested, they've got some really cool looking trees. They've got one through an escalator. They look fantastic. They've got a thing of indoor and outdoor trees. They do both. My concern is that I don't know what the pricing is, but by the time that we pull the tree out, we move the Blarney Stone and we get a new fake tree to put up, it would be close to, if not more expensive than just doing a fix to eliminate the box around the tree.
Wasn't the idea that the tree was kind of there and in a box because we weren't certain that that's where its final sort of resting place was going to be? So now we're talking about hardscaping something, which is sort of committing ourselves to the location.
That is, the box was put around it as well to raise the tree up. The other tree was a different species of
Yep.
tree. So that was, to get those lower branches out, there was a visual impairment there with the older tree. So that was why we raised that tree up, to hopefully alleviate that situation.
Is it a good look for a tree city to have an artificial tree in its downtown? I mean, I'm not trying to be too sarcastic,
I
but
would
yeah.
prefer to keep the original tree
Okay.
down there.
I mean,
It is not a requirement.
well,
For instance, I mean, we, in Provo was a Tree City, USA.
Yeah.
And they had a live tree for a long time until the tree, came sick, had to be removed. They went to an artificial tree, and it was great. It looked good. It served its purpose. The reason you would want to do an artificial tree is really for location-based purposes. One of the reasons we had looked at it, doing a tree we would only bring in for that event, was sightline issues with coming onto Pioneer Way there. I think this new species, that's not as much of an issue. So we're leaning towards doing the live tree now. But originally that was kind of the plan, was that tree needs to go. It was dying, and we had a lot of traffic issues with it. We were also looking at changing the location. We're looking at doing an artificial tree for a couple years till we found a good permanent location. Main Street, Margaret would like to keep the Christmas tree there on Pioneer Way instead of moving it to another area in the city. But there's just a lot, it's a hardscape, boulevard that doesn't have a lot of great locations for a very large city-style Christmas tree. I think Brandon has a pretty good solution with what they're going to do with the raised bed and provide some seeing around it. And it seems like we've addressed the sightline issue. So, but this is again a decision that we would love to have public feedback on, rather than us make this choice and have it backfire.
can we make the Blarney Stone mobile?
No.
I mean,
We
it's a couple
have
thousand
mo-
pounds.
I mean, we have
There's
moved
carts
it,
for
right?
it.
We moved it from Windjammer Park to Pioneer Way. It was actually on a private parcel.
Yeah.
The owner had us remove everything from there, and so we put it back to the original location. There's not a lot of great places to put it on Pioneer Way. We have a few kind of plaza-ish areas, on the corners. Staff would, I think, rather leave it at Windjammer Park, but we'll do whatever.
I just
the
wonder
consensus
about
is.
putting something for every holiday that we have all on one corner. If that starts to feel like Grandma's attic rather than like something to go to and, actually, I don't know, have some kind of moment with it or to make it marketable or profitable. I mean, we got buskers on the corner there. We're going to have a Blarney Stone. We're going to have Christmas
As
tree.
government workers, we don't register or understand irony, so
Yeah.
be careful what you suggest.
Fair enough. I'm wondering if there's a turkey out there and maybe a few other odds and ends. It just seems like overdoing it. Maybe we got a little too much holiday all in one corner.
I'm not totally opposed to it. I support staff's recommendation of keeping it at Windjammer Park where it currently was located. You know, when we have, you know, to your point of multi, you know, what are cultural events, recognition. You know, Windjammer Park, you know, we're going to put in the windmill in. You know, this provides kind of an Irish presence. We have other culturally significant art pieces, you know, we're putting around there. That lends itself a little bit to the attractiveness of that location. But I understand what they're trying to achieve with the parade. So, you know, I'm not opposed to moving it if we can do it in a location that is going to make sense. And maybe that's something that you guys want to maybe have a site visit with the Arts Commission and downtown or the Main Street Association and you know, look and say, okay, does this make sense? If we're going to do it, I'd rather do it once and be done with it than have staff moving it back and forth, which is what I want to avoid.
Where is it at in Windjammer Park right now?
So where the clean water facility is, if you're walking west towards the clean water facility, it's on your right-hand side. It's straight ahead on that, right off of the main loop around there, right next to the flagpole. It is, whenever we put it back, that was where we chose that location to put it back in. And that was, so if somebody hadn't been here, whenever the windmill was here, that's where the Blarney Stone had been. So if they were coming back from 10, 15-year hiatus, then they were specifically looking for the Blarney Stone. It is approximately where it was originally.
And let the Irish people have one more reminder of the Dutch overshadowing them in this community. It's a joke, but yeah, I think maybe moving it from the foot of the windmill would be a good idea for the Irish heritage, but I don't think sticking it next to that Christmas tree is the best idea. So until a good one comes along, I think the staff recommendation of leaving it at Windjammer makes a whole lot of sense.
I agree. Any other comments, questions on that?
Yeah. I think a city center location that everybody knows where it is, the public expects that's where, you know, functions are going to be, and they don't move around. I think there's benefit to that. I mean, whether it's Christmas or 4th of July or you name it, that's city center. And that's where you'd expect the congregation to be. That's a general comment.
Okay.
Okay, we'll take your comments and feedback back to Margaret and, you know, keep working with her on what we end up doing with this.
Okay, great. All right. Item I, facility tour scheduling.
So we had talked in previous commission meetings about wanting to do maybe a site visit with a couple rec centers. And we also talked about doing a tour on base as well. So wanted to see if we can get something nailed down and actually put on the calendar to do that. So first wanted to see with you guys what you wanted to do first. If we go off island, you know, that's going to be kind of a half-day trip, so we just need to schedule it out a little bit. But what's important to you? These site visit facility field trips are incredibly useful, and you know, I've taken staff and actually gone to other states and did a whole tour of like facilities, and had another Parks and Recreation department tell us, hey, here's what we do, here's what we wish we had done differently, here's kind of lessons that we learned when we built this facility, or you know, here's some programming that we do that, you know, and we take a lot of those best practices and kind of lessons learned back for our own planning efforts. So I think it will be very informative for you guys. Just wanted to see where you wanted to start with it.
I think the base is an important one. We're the same customer, same clientele, so to speak. Either Shane or I could make another contact with the MWR director over there. And if they're non-responsive, either him or I could just take you around.
Yeah, Rob Lieutenant's the new N9, new-ish. I mean, he's been there about 6 months, so he's kind of settled in, so I can re-engage with him again.
Yeah, that'd be great. I hadn't had a lot of success with Tiffany. I did get my base pass upgraded, so I can just take you guys all on base. But I'd love to have some of their personnel there to kind of talk with us a little bit about their facilities and programming. So, yeah, if anyone has a contact they can help connect me with, I appreciate it.
I too think we should start at the base. Let's start in our neighborhood first with the same people that'll be most impacted by any learning and any partnership that we can do, and then move from there, widen our gaze.
Is there a date, that we kind of tentatively want to target? Because we'll need to provide notice since we'll have a quorum. Do you
Okay,
want to do
I
it
can make
in
anything
lieu
work
of
as
one of
long
our
as we
meetings or
have
as a special
3
meeting?
weeks, ahead of time. I can schedule a day off, so for me, that's fine. As long as we have 2 to 3 weeks notice, I'm good. Just not on the weekends.
Should we try and shoot for maybe the beginning, first half of April?
Yeah,
Maybe like that second week in April?
yeah, that would work.
The only day I could make it is April 8th,
April 8th?
which is also our meeting day also.
So, how about, let's see, it'll be a little bit dependent on their staff, but maybe the morning of the 10th? Would that work for everyone? Anyone have a conflict?
That works for me.
Okay, we'll tentatively shoot for that. Okay.
Anything else for that item at this time?
Yeah, I think we don't seem to have a close association with the marina. I mean, I know it's part of your department. We seldom, if ever, talk about it other than updates from you. I think it'd be educational. I don't think it's a high priority for us to see it. I know they have their own advisory board and all that, but
I will talk with Chris's staff. Right now is actually a really good time before they get pretty busy. They get really busy once they get into the season. So, yeah, before May, I will schedule. I'll talk with him on what a couple of good days would be. We'd love to have you guys come down and feed the salmon. We'll show you some of the damage that we've had and what we're planning to do as far as the redevelopment. And you guys can look at Catalina Park and we can talk about the mini golf course and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I definitely could make a whole morning out of doing a site visit there, and that's pretty easy to schedule. I will send out a couple dates to see what works for you guys, and then we'll work on doing the notice. And yeah, we can do that pretty soon if you'd like to do that.
Okay.
this is kind of an additional item. Sorry, getting off track here a little bit. But you had mentioned before the idea of on the Scenic Heights Trail, well, not only to improve that trail, but to add it into a loop, make a better walkway through, which is now natural stuff out towards the water. I'd kind of like to get that on the radar, at least as a thought. And you had mentioned maybe making it disability access. Anyway, I think it would be a nice addition to the Scenic Heights Trail and make it a loop out there.
Yeah,
people use it for that purpose anyway, but.
Yeah, and there is kind of a primitive trail there. I've been working with development services on what we can actually do. So the property was purchased with Conservation Futures Fund, and there's restrictions on what can be developed there. And oddly, boardwalks is included in what you can't do there. I'm not sure how that's defined, or does boardwalk mean any kind of a trail? Is it certain built elevated trails or things like that? So the council is going to be discussing procurement of the property that's right there on the water, the beachfront property there, kind of where the trailhead with the neighborhood near that beach is, and then there's 2 parcels up above which are, you know, wetlands, but part of that would be used for like additional parking, things like that. So we're waiting to see what happens with those, but I think if we do go forward with purchasing those, we'll want to look at, yeah, some kind of a trail improvement. We're still working on what can we actually build out there, but.
Okay, here's another big one. This would be like a 4-hour trip one way. And that's to the facility, I can't remember the name of the town now, where they have the multi-use facility. Where's that? Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
I'd
we-
love to see that facility.
Yeah.
Maybe if we're really to do a day-long or whatever thing, you could tie something else into it, since we're down that way, if there's anything else that would be of interest.
Yeah, and yeah, that was the city we had looked at with a facility tour offsite. I said that'll be like at least a half day. I will reach out to Centralia and see what we can get scheduled. We'll probably do that. So we'll do the marina first, then we'll try and get on base April 10th, and then we'll do Centralia after that.
Okay. All right, let's move on to item J, committee reports.
Okay, I can take it for the Facilities Committee. You've already addressed everything that we covered, but just for everybody else's knowledge, we talked about the pickleball court design progress and approval for the additional funding. We talked about Harbor Heights' next steps and getting Dynamic Discs involved as an assist, and the money that would be required for that. The 4th of July fireworks launch site, we talked briefly about that. The feasibility study and our hopes that we'll get some feedback from the state soon on the funding for that feasibility study. Just touched on the park signs for the 33 different parks that's on the agenda. I think that's a great agenda item. Marina docks and dredging, priorities for Windjammer. Again, we've touched on all of these today, and the balance of $1 million to dedicate to that. Potential for grant opportunities through the state's Recreation Conservation Office, which might include pickleball court construction, the center parking lot, the playground, and community forest, Harbor Heights issues. There was a council workshop. I'm glad you put that note out. That was a success. I thought it was great. I think it was really positively received, and there's about 20 or so pickleball players here, which I think, help sell that. I would like to ensure that's going to be on the next agenda, which is the 19th, because the pickleball folks would like to show up again in support of that. And then Angel installation, trying to get that done before July. So you've covered all those, but I just want to let people know that's what we talked about.
For the Playgrounds and Programming Committee, we kind of touched on everything there. We primarily talked about the inclusive playground and location being at Windjammer Park as the ideal location for that. The wood chips going into the 5 parks, we talked about that already. That was primarily what we talked about, was the inclusive playground at our last meeting, which we kind of covered.
Yeah, also, we talked about something that I wasn't even aware of, that the base is designated as a exceptional family base. And so that triggers a couple of opportunities for the base. So they are specifically equipped to handle families with special needs. But there's long waiting lists, right, for a lot of their services. But Captain Hanks did identify as one of the top issues with childcare and creating community for enlisted families, or they don't re-enlist, right? So that, along with like loneliness and isolation issues, are 2 of the areas that he's really trying to address. And so that's something we can definitely partner with the Navy on.
Okay. Any other comments? All right, directors' updates.
I was hoping to have an update on the windmill for you guys. but I don't. So I'm waiting on something from Brian Jones. If any of you guys are a part of the Rotary Club or have some of those connections and want to help me reach out and see if we have some kind of a progress status, that'd be great. I haven't heard anything since December on it. Last I knew, he was about to get architectural drawings, but haven't had an update since then. Feasibility study. So we did get word last week that we were approved, and the $200,000 for the feasibility study was included in the state legislature's budget package for their supplemental session. So congratulations, that's a huge win. Funny, I attended the Oak Harbor Royalty Pageant the other night, and some of the Mr. Oak Harbor Royalty youth guys were talking about the project and Parks and Recreation and the work that they've been doing on trying to help promote this feasibility study. And I wanted to just dump up and tell them, hey, you guys, good job. We got the $200,000. So that will be available in July. So we'll be starting fairly quickly here on the planning of the new recreation center. So this is the first public announcement about that. We'll probably put out a PSA just to inform everyone, and I'll probably reach out to River Powers and let her know, hey, thank you for the youth in the community that have kind of come forward to help spearhead this endeavor, and so a lot of work ahead for us as far as planning efforts. Base visit, okay, we just covered that. Angel statue, so something to be aware of with the angel statue is we found out that, or at least there was some kind of a notice that the statue is actually, with the way they're putting in the base, higher than what was presented to the, what's it called? The hearing examiner, right. Unfortunately, we have a new hearing examiner, so so I don't think they were the ones that dealt with this before. We're going out and we're going to remeasure the statue. I talked with Sabrina a bit about this over the weekend when she notified me about it. I'm not totally confident that this is actually going to be an issue because the base is embedded in the ground, the base slab, and then they have a steel plate that's put on that, and that's what the statue bolts into, and that's actually at ground level. So unless there was some error with the actual measuring of the statue itself, it shouldn't be off. There's a cap slab that's put on top of that has seating and stuff like that. So I don't know if there's a assumption that the statue is actually on top of all that, or what's going on. But anyway, just to make you aware of that, if we have to go back to the hearing examiner, it might be another 8 weeks or so before we can do the installation. It doesn't matter to me. We don't really have anything that is critical as far as that park other than the Hydros for Heroes. That's a blackout time. So we either need to have the project done and the site disturbance finished. We would do the park improvements after the statue is put in place, or we wait until after the statue's in place before we do any of that, or wait until after Hydros for Heroes to do any of the installations. So just to make you aware of that, I'll get you more information when I find out more about it. The code revision, I think I know what that might be about. Dave Cool wasn't here to present on it, but I know that they had stumbled across, and it's a different section, it's not the one that was on the agenda, but in 1.30, it states that no real property of the city shall be sold, released, leased, demised, traded, exchanged, or otherwise disposed of unless the same is authorized by the city council after public hearing. Developed city park property shall not be disposed of in any manner without citizen approval in an election, except as provided in subsection 2 of this section. I think this might be related to the Hilton property and the property swap with that. They might be looking at making a code revision so we don't have to go out to election to do that development. So just to put on your radar, we'll have it at the next meeting that Dave can be at to present this. I hadn't heard anything about it other than Sabrina brought this up. I think that might be what it's related to, so. And that's all I have for you guys.
All right, so let's go ahead and move on to member comments. Any member comments? Nope, okay. So determination of future agenda items.
I think the list that you put together is fantastic for the projects and initiatives for recreation and parks. You know, that can kind of serve as a base for updates on every meeting, only hitting things that had significant updates, not having to go through the whole list every time, because that's really useful to know what's happening. I also really encourage you put as much of that as you can on the website, because I think it's important for the public to see all the things that are happening, because there is a lot happening. Thanks.
Anything else? Yeah, if you have something that you'd like the commission to discuss, sure.
I'm wondering if you guys have talked in relation to the rec center. Have you talked to North Woodby Soccer Club at all about like an idea of bringing an indoor soccer facility or like space for an indoor soccer, club to happen at any point?
Not yet, but that'll all be fleshed out as part of the feasibility study. Yeah, they're definitely going to be a main stakeholder that we bring in on those.
Tom and I are on the facilities subcommittee, and we actually had some conversations with board members, just kind of to hear what their short-term and long-term, this was just a coffee that happened by accident, we'll say. And no, we just got together to hear what they were having, what they kind of were thinking, what they were thinking long-term, and how invested possibly they could be in programming different space, were it to be available indoor, outdoor, otherwise, kind of the dream list, their ideal state, all of that. So we had a good handle. This was several months ago, but obviously as more facts emerge and more formal conversations will need to take place. But we definitely did some preliminary groundwork research to get an understanding from the board members of what they were thinking and dreaming and all of that.
Okay, any other future agenda items at this time? No? Okay. All right, are we ready to adjourn?
Just keep an eye on the calendar for the next meeting. We like to have the agenda items a week prior, just so we can put the packet together. I think I'd also like, I get enough requests for like materials I share with you guys. I'll probably start putting that into the like an agenda packet, so you guys have those beforehand. You can look at it, and then you'll have it to look at after.
Yeah, that'd be great.
So if you have anything that you want to add onto the agenda, just keep in mind, try and get it to Carrie like at least a week before.
Okay. Did you have anything?